Jacob Chun slid a single folded sheet of paper to the center of the table. Professor Worden, ik weet. The office fell silent. Sunlight sliced through the blinds, striping the mahogany desk. Dust motes danced in the bright columns of air. The project lead, Professor Miles Warren, pushed his gold-rimmed glasses up the bridge of his nose, his brow furrowed. He didn't even glance at the letter, his gaze fixed sharply on Jake's face. Don't be ridiculous. We're about to enter the final integration phase. You're bailing now. Jake said nothing, simply meeting his gaze. The quiet defiance seemed to stoke the professor's anger. He'd run this research group for 3 years and had never met a young man with such audacity. Don't think you're so important, Jake. This team will do just fine without you. Sitting nearby, Chloe Sullivan, Jake's girlfriend, finally broke her silence. Her voice was laced with a barely concealed anxiety. Jake, stop it. Whatever this is, can we talk about it at home? Professor Warren is just trying to do what's best for the project. She reached for his arm, but he sidestepped the gesture without looking at her. Chloe's hand froze mid-air, a flicker of shock and embarrassment crossing her face. They had been together for 2 years, and Jake had never publicly disrespected her like this. He was always gentle, tolerant, even a little quiet. So much so that everyone assumed Chloe, the project's rising star, was the one carrying the unremarkable Jake Chun. A smooth, slightly arrogant voice cut through the tension. Let him go, Chloe. Everyone's got their own ambitions. The speaker was Leo Morgan, Professor Warren's prized protege, the same one Chloe often called a once-in-a-generation coding genius. He was dressed in a tailored blazer and chinos, his hair perfectly styled, a smirk playing on his lips. It was a smirk that held a clear note of contempt. Leo walked over to Jake, patting him on the shoulder in a show of false camaraderie. I get it, man. Working under me on this project. It's a lot of pressure. Not everyone can keep up with my vision. The words were spoken softly, but they landed like darts in the ears of everyone present. It was an open secret in the lab that Leo was the core, the soul of the project. Every major technical breakthrough, every key architectural decision. When presented to the university board, the PowerPoint slides only ever had one name on them, Leo Morgan. Jake was just a quiet executor, responsible for the grunt work on the periphery. Jake didn't even raise an eyebrow. Pressure? Yeah, the pressure was immense. The pressure of taking Leo's half-baked, bug-riddled, genius ideas and turning them into functional code. The pressure of patching the countless holes he created, only to see him take all the credit. Most people couldn't handle that kind of pressure. Professor Warren's expression softened as he looked at Leo with undisguised approval. Leo's right. Jake, your fundamentals are just too weak. It's normal that you can't keep up with him. Tell you what, take some time to cool off. I won't accept your resignation just yet. When the project is finished, you'll get your share of the bonus. His tone was one of condescending charity, as if Jake's resignation were just a childish tantrum to get attention. Chloe also breathed a sigh of relief. She walked over, her voice softening. Jake, listen to the professor. Leo has almost cracked the core algorithm. We're just one step away. Let's just see this through, okay? The core algorithm she mentioned was the project's entire technical linchpin. If they cracked it, it would send shockwaves through the domestic tech industry. And the recognized creator of that algorithm was the genius, Leo Morgan. Jake finally reacted. He lifted his head, his gaze sweeping past Chloe to land on Leo's smug, confident face. A bitter laugh rose in his throat. That so-called core algorithm was nothing but a discarded fragment from one of his own failed prototypes from 6 months ago. He'd tossed it into a junk folder on the shared server, never imagining Leo would dig it up, polish it, and pass it off as his own brilliant concept. The funniest part? Everyone bought it, including his girlfriend. No, thanks. Jake's voice was low but perfectly clear. I've already packed my things. He stood up, not looking at anyone. Professor Warren's face darkened completely. Jake, you walk out that door, and you'll find it's not so easy to come back. Leo added coolly, Don't be angry, Professor. He probably just wants to see what it's like in the real world. He'll learn soon enough that not every team has leaders like you and me. He turned to Jake, his smile painfully insincere. Good luck, man. Oh, and by the way, if you're free next week, you should come to the final project demo. You can witness how I am about to change the world." The boastful certainty was practically dripping from his words. Chloe watched Jake's retreating back, her anxiety turning to disappointment. She couldn't understand why he was being so immature, expressing his dissatisfaction in such a self-destructive way at the most critical moment. It was selfish. She bit her lip and decided not to follow him. He'd regret this. In 3 days, tops. Without this top-tier team, without Professor Warren's mentorship, without Leo's genius to guide him, what could an ordinary programmer from a state school possibly accomplish? The office door closed behind Jake. Professor Warren snorted, sweeping the resignation letter into the trash can. "So arrogant." Leo smiled reassuringly. "Don't worry about it, Professor. His leaving won't affect our progress at all. I've always been in charge of the core components. He was just a coder. We can replace him with any intern." Warren nodded, completely convinced. "You're right. The focus is on you. That core algorithm. Make sure it's fully optimized and packaged before the demo next week." Leo puffed out his chest confidently. "Don't worry, Professor. I'll have it done in 3 days, guaranteed." He was already fantasizing about the project success party, where he would publicly ask Chloe out. He was the genius who truly deserved her. As for Jake, a washed-up failure everyone would soon forget. Out in the hallway, Jake's steps were unhurried. He could picture Leo in the office, swaggering and making promises to Warren and Chloe. A small, unseen smile touched his lips. 3 days? That core algorithm Leo treasured was a trap he had intentionally left behind. A magnificent, fragile castle in the sky. On the surface, it could perform 90% of its functions, enough to fool any layman. But the moment you ran the final stress test and tried to package it, the entire architecture would collapse like a house of cards from the very foundation up. The only way to fix it was to tear it down and start over. With the real, complete, and industry-leading solution he had hidden on his personal laptop. A solution at least 3 years ahead of its time. "You're a genius, right, Leo? I hope you have fun for the next 3 days." Jake stepped out of the research building into the bright sunshine. He took a deep breath, the frustration that had been building for 3 years seeming to finally escape his lungs. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in a long time. It was answered almost instantly. "Jake, my man, I thought you'd forgotten about me. Figured you were going to live out your life as a hermit in that tiny lab." Jake smiled. "Dave, I quit." There were 2 seconds of silence on the other end, followed by an explosive shout of joy. "Holy crap. For real? Stay right where you are. I'm coming to get you. We're getting drunk tonight." "Not tonight," Jake said, looking at the distant sky. "You always said your company had an opening for a chief architect. Right now, I'm interested." Chapter 2, Jake hung up, hailed an Uber, and gave the driver the address of his apartment complex. For the first time in 3 years, he felt weightless, like a man who'd been forced to dance in heavy chains and had finally been set free. Leaning against the window, he watched the city streets blur past, his mind drifting. 3 years ago, on his graduate advisor's recommendation, he had joined Professor Warren's research group. Back then, Chloe was a first-year grad student, bright, innocent, and full of passion for her work. She had pursued him. She said she loved the quiet focus he had when he worked. Leo had joined the lab a year after them. He was smart, smooth-talking, and knew exactly how to market himself. He quickly became Professor Warren's golden boy and the genius Chloe couldn't stop talking about. Jake wasn't oblivious to the change. Slowly, Chloe spent less time discussing their work and more time talking about Leo. "Jake, Leo came up with the most amazing idea today. Leo's a true genius. He saw the key to such a complex problem instantly. You should really try to learn from Leo more often, instead of just plugging away at the basic stuff." Jake had tried to explain that the seeds of those genius ideas often came from his own earlier concepts. That the key to the problem was something he'd spent sleepless nights locating within mountains of data. But Chloe would just cut him off impatiently. "Jake, I know you work hard too, but you have to admit there's a difference in natural talent between people." After that, he stopped trying to explain. He just quietly wrote the most critical code, solved the most difficult problems, and watched Leo stand at the podium, soaking up all the glory. He thought if he just held on until the project succeeded, everything would be fine. Chloe would see his true worth. But today, he finally understood. In the eyes of Chloe and Professor Warren, he had been permanently labeled as mediocre. Whatever he did was just grunt work for the real genius. His contributions, his sacrifices, were taken for granted. If that's how it was going to be, then it was time to end it. His phone vibrated. A text message from Chloe. "Jake, where the hell are you? Answer your phone." It was followed immediately by another. "Do you think this is cool? Do you have any idea how pissed Professor Warren is? I'm so disappointed in you." Jake stared at the screen, his expression unchanging. He switched his phone to silent and tossed it aside. He got back to his small, one-bedroom apartment. It was simple, under 400 square feet, but he kept it meticulously neat. He booted up his laptop and connected to an encrypted personal server. On the screen, endless lines of code streamed like a waterfall. This was his real work from the past 3 years. A complete, revolutionary new technical architecture, light years beyond the trap version he'd left at the lab. He tapped a few keys, and a complex, dynamic dataflow model appeared on the screen, stable, elegant, and filled with a kind of industrial beauty. This was what would actually change the world, and now it belonged only to him. Meanwhile, back at the lab, the atmosphere was thick with dread. What's going on? Why did the server crash? Professor Warren's roar echoed through the hall. The few researchers responsible for system maintenance were sweating profusely, their fingers flying across their keyboards, but their faces grew paler by the second. "Professor, it's not the server. It's Leo's code. It seems to have triggered a low-level conflict that's caused a total system deadlock." "What?" Warren spun around to face Leo. Leo looked just as stunned. He had just been following his plan, starting the final packaging and optimization of his core algorithm. But for some reason, every line of code he committed triggered a cascade of red error messages. Finally, the entire test server screen went dead, replaced by a single, silent blue screen. "Impossible." Leo's voice was sharp. "My algorithm is perfect. It has to be a problem with the server environment. Right, it must be Jake. He must have sabotaged it before he left." He clung to the excuse like a drowning man grasping at a piece of driftwood. The other researchers exchanged nervous glances, not daring to speak. They knew the server environment had been stable for over 6 months without a single issue. Besides, the modules Jake worked on were on a completely different level from Leo's core algorithm. Chloe's face was pale. Staring at the glaring blue screen, she felt a strange sense of unease. She pulled out her phone and tried calling Jake again. Still no answer. "Useless. All of you." Warren paced back and forth, fuming. "Leo, you said you were the core. The genius. The server is down. So do something." Cold sweat beaded on Leo's forehead. He tried to remain calm. "Professor, don't worry. It's just a small issue. I can solve it. It's probably just a minor bug. I just need some time to track it down." He sat back down at his terminal, trying to find the source of the problem. But the code he thought he knew so well now looked like gibberish. Every function, every variable, seemed laced with a bizarre, hidden malevolence. They looked perfect together, yet they were full of traps. The more he tried to fix it, the more catastrophic the system failure became. An hour passed. Then, too, the air in the lab was so heavy you could almost feel it. Leo's shirt was soaked with sweat, his face as white as a sheet. His screen was a mountain of incomprehensible error codes. His so-called genius brain was a complete blank. Professor Warren's patience finally ran out. He snatched Chloe's phone and found Jake's number. The result was the same. The cold, automated voice saying the user was unavailable. "How dare he not take my call?" Warren was trembling with rage. He looked at Chloe, who was on the verge of tears, and commanded, "You, use your iMessage. Send him a voice note. Tell him his system has a major problem and to get his ass back here. Now." Chloe bit her lip, her fingers shaking as she pressed the record button. She didn't know what to say. Should she yell at him or beg him? Just then, Leo, who had been silent, suddenly looked up, a strange light in his eyes. "Professor, I've got it. This isn't a technical problem." Everyone turned to look at him. Leo took a deep breath, as if he'd found his confidence again. "It's a logic bomb. Jake planted it before he left. He wanted to see us fail. The trigger has to be related to him. Maybe his employee ID or the initials of his name. This explanation gave Professor Warren an immediate target for his fury. I knew it. That ungrateful bastard. The traitor. Chloe was stunned. A logic bomb? Would Jake really do something like that? The Jake she knew was quiet, but his integrity was solid. But how else could she explain this mess? Could it really be him? Warren couldn't wait. He yelled at a junior researcher. Go to HR. Get all of Jake's personal information. Employee ID, birthday, social security number, everything. We'll try them all. I'm going to disarm this thing today if it's the last thing I do. The entire project team, like a group of headless chickens, began a ridiculous guessing game. At that exact moment, the man who started it all was sitting comfortably in a coffee shop. Across from him sat a man in a floral shirt and sunglasses. It was his old friend, Dave, who, look at you, Jake. 3 years, and you've got that brooding artist vibe down pat. Dave took off his sunglasses, revealing a perpetually amused face. So what's the real story? Did that little lab finally kick you to the curb? Jake took a sip of his coffee. I kicked them to the curb. Dave blinked, then burst out laughing. That's what I'm talking about. That old fool Miles Warren was lucky to have you. How dare he give you grief? Dave was Jake's college roommate, and one of the few people who knew his true capabilities. After graduation, Dave had joined a fast-rising tech company and was now a director of engineering. Jake, on the other hand, had chosen to work in a university lab, a decision that had always bothered Dave. All right, let's not talk about them, Dave said, leaning forward and lowering his voice. You serious about that chief architect position at my company? Jake nodded. You said you were working on a foundational operating system and hit a wall. At the mention of this, Dave's expression turned serious. It's more than a wall. It's a mountain. We've invested over $100 million, assembled the best team in the country, and after 2 years, the thing we built is less efficient than open-source frameworks from a decade ago. The board gave us an ultimatum, a breakthrough, or the project gets scrapped. He looked at Jake, his eyes full of hope. Jake, if you come, I'll stake my director position on you. Salary, stock options, you name it. Jake smiled. Let's not talk about compensation just yet. He pulled a slim laptop from his backpack, opened it, and slid it across the table to Dave. Take a look at something. On the screen was the stable, elegant, dynamic data flow model. Dave glanced at it, and his entire body went rigid as if struck by lightning. His jaw dropped, and his eyes were glued to the screen as if he were witnessing a miracle. This is this. His voice trembled. As a top-tier engineering director, he understood what this model represented better than anyone. It wasn't just a breakthrough. It was a new era. Just then, Jake's silenced phone lit up. It was a voice message notification. He picked it up and played it. Chloe's voice, choked with tears and panic, came through the speaker. Jake, what do you want? The whole server is down. Leo said you planted a logic bomb. Can you please just come back and fix it? I'm begging you. Please, come back. For me. Chapter 3 in the softly lit coffee shop. Chloe's desperate plea felt jarringly out of place. Dave tore his eyes away from the miraculous code on the screen and shot Jake a gossipy look. Who the X? Jake's face was impassive. He simply deleted the message as if it were spam. Not important. His gaze returned to his laptop. This architecture, if applied to your project, could boost performance by at least 300% and cut the development cycle in half. Dave's attention snapped back immediately. He stared at the screen, trying to burn every byte into his memory. With a trembling hand, he reached out as if to touch it, then pulled back, afraid to desecrate a work of art. 300%. Cut in half, he mumbled, then looked up, his eyes blazing with a fanatical light. Jake, you're a god. You're my hero. Jake closed the laptop and leaned back against the booth. So, is that chief architect position still on the table? On the table? It's yours. Dave slapped his thigh in excitement. Forget chief architect. If you wanted my director job, I'd resign tomorrow. Hell, I'm calling our CEO right now. He actually pulled out his phone, ready to dial. Jake held up a hand to stop him. Not yet. A sly smile played on his lips. I have a few loose ends to tie up. Back at the lab, chaos reigned. They had spent the entire afternoon trying every combination they could think of. Jake's employee ID, his birthday, the last 6 digits of his social security number, even his start date. Nothing worked. The mocking blue screen remained, a silent testament to their incompetence. Leo was a wreck. He slumped in his chair, staring blankly at the ceiling. The self-proclaimed genius was utterly defeated by a real technical barrier. His brain, fried from hours of stress and fear, felt like mush. Professor Warren was a caged lion, pacing furiously. You still haven't found him? How can a grown man just vanish? Chloe's eyes were red and swollen. Her voice messages had gone unanswered. For the first time, she felt a sliver of fear toward Jake. The man she knew as gentle and quiet was, when pushed, terrifyingly cold. Just then, the lab door opened. It was Jake. He had changed into a clean set of casual clothes and looked as calm as if he were just dropping by after a leisurely walk. Every eye in the room instantly locked onto him. A mixture of anger, resentment, confusion, and a hidden sliver of hope. You have a nerve to come back here. Professor Warren was the first to charge forward, jabbing a finger in Jake's face. Look at what you've done. I was blind to ever hire you. This is sabotage. It's a crime. I'm going to call the police. Leo, as if jolted back to life, sprang from his chair. Jake, you're a despicable coward. You couldn't cut it, so you resort to these dirty tricks to get revenge. You're pathetic. Jake's gaze swept over the furious professor and the frantic Leo before finally landing on Chloe. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Her expression was a complex cocktail of disappointment, accusation, and a reliance she herself didn't recognize. Jake looked away, his tone as casual as if he were discussing the weather. Oh, and what exactly did I do? Don't play dumb. Leo snapped. Are you denying you planted a logic bomb in the system? You were just jealous of my talent, jealous of the success I was about to achieve. Jake let out a short, sharp laugh, as if he'd just heard the funniest joke in the world. A logic bomb? Leo, have you been watching too many sci-fi movies? He walked over to the blue screen server and glanced at it. This is just a simple deadlock caused by memory overflow. What, did your genius brain short-circuit and forget every term except logic bomb? Memory overflow? Deadlock? The junior researchers exchanged glances. They knew the terms, of course, but the complex crash state on the screen didn't look like such a simple problem. Leo's face flushed a deep red. You're lying. I checked. It's not a memory overflow. Stop trying to sound smart. You checked. Jake turned to him with a half-smile. How did you check? With your genius intuition? Ignoring Leo, he pulled up a chair and dragged a keyboard in front of him. For the sake of the last 3 years, and for... He paused, his eyes flicking almost imperceptibly toward Chloe. Certain people, I can fix this for you. Warren was stunned. He hadn't expected Jake to say that. Leo was instantly on guard. Chloe, however, felt a wave of complicated emotions. When he said certain people, was he talking about her? Did he still have feelings for her? Before she could speak, Jake's next words stopped her cold. However, I resigned. I'm not an employee anymore. Jake slowly raised one finger. Consulting fee, $20,000 an hour. Billed for the full hour, even if it takes less. Cash. No transfers. What? Professor Warren's eyes nearly bulged out of his head. Are you insane? That's highway robbery. $20,000 an hour? Who'd he think he was? A Nobel laureate? Leo shrieked. Professor, don't listen to him. He's just trying to exploit the situation. He set the fire, and now he wants us to pay him to put it out. Jay paid them no mind. He glanced at his watch. It's 4:05 p.m. I'll give you 5 minutes to decide. At 4:10, I'm gone. He then leaned back in the chair and closed his eyes, perfectly at ease. The lab was deathly silent. Everyone looked at Professor Warren. 20 grand was nothing to the project's budget, but the humiliation was unbearable. To let a failure he just kicked out come back and fleece them like this. The seconds ticked by. Warren's face was a shifting canvas of rage and indecision. He looked at the broken Leo, then at the clock on the wall. The hand was pointing to 4:09. Next week's demo was tied to millions in future funding, not to mention his own academic reputation. If the project failed, fine. The word was squeezed from between his clenched teeth. He turned to his assistant. Go to my office safe. Get $20,000 in cash. Leo's face turned ashen. The professor agreeing meant he was admitting Leo's utter incompetence. Chloe watched Jake, who was resting with his eyes closed, her heart a tangled mess. Was this the same gentle, almost timid Jake she thought she knew? He had become a stranger, assertive and powerful. Soon, the assistant returned with a black duffel bag and placed it heavily on the desk next to Jake. "The money's here." Warren's voice was laced with ice. Jake opened his eyes and glanced at the bag, not even bothering to check its contents. He cracked his knuckles, producing a series of sharp pops. "All right, start the clock." Before the words had even left his mouth, his hands became a blur, dancing across the keyboard. The dead blue screen was instantly replaced by a torrent of scrolling code. Everyone held their breath, craning their necks to see what he was doing. But Jake's speed was blinding. All they could see was a dizzying sequence of commands and flashing windows. He wasn't just coding. He was conducting a symphony. Leo was dumbfounded. His own coding speed, which he'd always been proud of, looked like a toddler's crawl compared to this. What's more, many of the commands Jake was typing were things he'd never even seen before. Extremely low-level system calls and direct memory address manipulations, executed with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. Chloe was even more shaken. She had always thought of Jake as a methodical plotter, but the level of understanding and control over the system he was now demonstrating was far beyond anything she could comprehend. It was on a completely different level than anything Leo had ever shown. Time seemed to stand still. The only sound in the lab was the crisp tapping of the keyboard. Beep. In less than 5 minutes, Jake's fingers stopped. He pressed the enter key gently. The scrolling code vanished. In its place was the familiar, normal system login screen. The entire system was back online. Silence. A stunned, absolute silence. Everyone stared, dumbfounded, at the screen, then at Jake. 5 minutes. The system crash that had stumped them all afternoon, that had broken their resident genius and sent their professor into a rage. Jake had fixed it in less than 5 minutes. Jake stood up, dusting off his hands as if he'd just finished a trivial task. He glanced at the clock. 4:14 p.m. Not a full hour, but billed as one. He picked up the duffel bag of cash, weighed it in his hand, and turned to the pale-faced Leo. "By the way, I forgot to tell you." Jake's lips curled into a cold, mocking smile. That simple memory overflow that caused the crash? It was from a variable you forgot to initialize in a piece of optimization code you submitted yesterday afternoon. A genius who forgets to initialize his variables. That's a new one for me. Without another glance, he turned and walked toward the door. The world seemed to shrink, leaving only Leo's ragged breathing and the echo of that final, cutting remark. Just as Jake's hand touched the doorknob, Professor Warren snapped out his trance. He lunged forward, blocking Jake's path. The anger and arrogance were gone from his face, replaced by a desperate, complex expression of shock, regret, and intense desire. "Wait, Jake, you can't leave." Chapter 4. Professor Warren's voice held a tremor he couldn't conceal. He stared at Jake as if he were looking at a priceless treasure he had lost and just found again. The technical prowess Jake had displayed in those 5 minutes had completely shattered his perception. This wasn't just a good programmer. This was a master, a virtuoso. A man who forgets to initialize a variable versus a man who solved a low-level deadlock in 5 minutes. It was painfully clear who the genius was and who was the fraud. And he, Miles Warren, had mistaken a diamond for a worthless stone and thrown it away with his own hands. Regret flooded his heart. "Jake, I was wrong. I was blind." Warren's posture was now incredibly deferential, his tone almost pleading. "Don't go. Stay. You'll be the new core of the project team. No, the co-lead. I'll make you co-lead. I'll double your salary. No, triple it." The entire lab stared in stunned silence. Chloe and Leo were particularly shocked. Chloe looked from Warren's fawning expression to Jake's impassive face, her mind reeling. Co-lead? Triple the salary? Was this the same arrogant, authoritarian professor she knew? Leo's face drained of all color, turning a deathly gray. He felt like a clown stripped naked in front of an audience. Every word of Warren's pleading was another slap across his face. Jake paused, but didn't turn around. "Professor, have you forgotten? I already quit. I never approved your resignation. It doesn't count." Warren said desperately, "If you stay, we can negotiate anything. That core algorithm, you'll have full control. Leo will be your assistant. That last sentence was the final nail in Leo's coffin. His body swayed, and he nearly collapsed. His assistant? The celebrated genius was now being told to fetch coffee for the failure he had long despised? What could be more humiliating? Jake finally turned around. His eyes were calm, but they carried a weight that was hard to meet. No, thanks. I'm no longer interested in cleaning up other people's messes. He pushed past the professor and walked toward the door. Warren's face was a mask of despair. He knew that what Jake had just shown was only the tip of the iceberg. Only Jake could truly deliver the core algorithm. If he left, what would happen to the demo next week? To his millions in funding? To his academic reputation? Jake! Chloe finally broke and rushed forward, grabbing the hem of his shirt from behind. Her voice was choked with tears. Jake, don't do this. I'm begging you, please. Can we start over? I was wrong, She was rambling, unable to articulate the storm of regret and panic raging inside her. She finally understood just how colossally she had messed up. She had mistaken a fish eye for a pearl and thrown away a true diamond. Jake's body tensed. He could feel the slight tug on his shirt, feel the trembling of the girl behind him. Once upon a time, he had wanted to protect this girl for the rest of his life. But now his heart was cold. Just as he was about to pull away, a loud, cheerful voice boomed from the lab entrance. Excuse me, is this where I can find Mr. Jacob Chun? Everyone turned. A middle-aged man in a floral shirt and sunglasses strode in, flanked by two assistants in sharp black suits. The bizarre trio made everyone pause. It was Dave who, but now he wasn't Jake's goofy college buddy. He was the director of engineering at Apogee Innovations, one of the country's top tech firms. Dave's eyes immediately found Jake in the center of the crowd, and he noticed the black duffel bag in his hand. A knowing smile spread across his face. He took off his sunglasses and scanned the cramped, chaotic lab, his gaze lingering for a moment on Professor Warren and the ghost-white Leo. Finally, his eyes landed on Jake, filled with undisguised admiration. Mr. Chun, we finally found you. Our CEO heard about your situation and sent me personally to formally invite you to join Apogee Innovations. Apogee Innovations. The name hit the lab like a thunderclap. Everyone there knew Apogee. It was a giant in the tech industry, a holy grail that countless programmers would kill to get into. Professor Warren's face turned grim. His worst fear had come true. A talent like Jake would be instantly snatched up by corporate vultures the moment he was free. Who are you? Warren asked, his voice weak. Dave didn't even bother looking at him. He walked straight to Jake and extended his hand warmly. Mr. Chim, my apologies. My name is Dave, Director of Research and Development at Apogee Innovations. He made sure to emphasize the word director. Then, in front of everyone, he dropped a bombshell. Our CEO has authorized me to offer you the position of chief architect. The starting salary is $500,000 a year, with no upper limit. Additionally, there will be a $200,000 signing bonus and 0.1% of the company's founding stock options. Boom. It was as if an atomic bomb had been detonated in the lab. Everyone was shell-shocked. $500,000 a year. $200 signing bonus. And 0.1% of founding stock. Apogee was a pre-IPO unicorn, valued in the tens of billions. 0.1% of its stock would be worth tens of millions of dollars upon IPO. Professor Warren's mind went blank. The triple salary he had just offered felt like a pathetic joke. Chloe was completely stunned. The hand clutching Jake's shirt fell limp. She had always thought of him as an ordinary programmer making less than $1,000 a week. She had even secretly bought him expensive clothes, feeling a sense of superiority as she did. But now, a company was offering him a sum she couldn't even dream of. They weren't from the same world at all. Leo felt the room spin, his vision darkening. $500,000 a year? Tens of millions in stock. Things he couldn't even fathom in his wildest dreams were being handed to the man he considered a failure. Meanwhile, he, the supposed genius, was about to have his career ruined by academic fraud. The immense shock was too much, and he crumpled to the floor with a soft thud. The room was terrifyingly silent, filled only by the sound of Dave's enthusiastic voice. Mr. Chun, this is just a preliminary offer. We are prepared to meet any and all of your demands. If you say yes, we can sign the letter of intent right now. Our legal and HR teams are waiting downstairs in the car. This wasn't just poaching talent. This was driving an excavator through the wall to get it. All eyes were on Jake, waiting for his answer. He had rejected Professor Warren without a second thought. But faced with such an incredible, sincere offer from Apogee, what would he choose? Jake looked at Dave's eager face, then glanced at the pathetic heap that was Leo on the floor and the shell-shocked Professor Warren. Finally, his gaze drifted past them all toward the window. Outside, the world was vast and open. For the first time since he quit, a genuine smile spread across his face. He turned to Dave and extended his hand. "Mr. Who? It's a pleasure to do business with you." Chapter 5. Those words hammered into the hearts of Professor Warren and Chloe. Warren swayed, his face turning a sickly gray. It was over. He knew it. Jake was a dragon that had been hibernating in his tiny pond for 3 years. The moment the opportunity arose, he was destined to soar. And he was the foolish fisherman who had personally chased the dragon away. Chloe's vision blurred as tears finally broke free. She watched Jake and Dave shake hands, feeling her world crumble. The man who used to bend to her every whim, the boyfriend she thought she knew inside and out, was now impossibly distant, so far away she could never reach him again. She had lost, utterly and completely. Dave was overjoyed. He gripped Jake's hand, unwilling to let go. "Fantastic. Jake, Mr. Chun. I'll get legal and HR up here right now. We'll get the contract signed today. No ruse." Jake pulled his hand back and picked up the duffel bag of cash. He hefted it once, then walked directly over to the collapsed form of Leo Morgan. Everyone's breath caught. What was he going to do? Humiliate Leo in front of everyone? As they watched, Jake crouched down and placed the black bag in front of Leo. The zipper was open, revealing stacks of crisp $100 bills. Leo's eyes were unfocused. He stared blankly at the money, then at Jake. Jake's expression was neutral, his voice devoid of emotion. "Take this 20,000. It's yours." Everyone was baffled. What was this? Slap someone and then offer them a reward? Even Dave was confused. Jake ignored their stunned silence and continued, his voice low. "From the demo I threw in the server's trash folder 6 months ago, to the so-called core algorithm you packaged to the mess you made today." With every word, Leo's face grew paler. "All in all, you've plagiarized, copied, and imitated my work at least 100 times. I never said anything. Not because I was stupid, and not because I was scared." Jake's voice was quiet, but it pierced the conscience of everyone present. "I just wanted to see how far a fraud who steals other people's ideas could go." His gaze slowly drifted over Professor Warren and Chloe. "And I must say, you all put on a very surprising performance." Warren's face flushed red, then white with shame. Chloe trembled, barely able to stand. So, he knew. He had known all along. He had been watching them like an audience member at a tragicomedy, observing their ridiculous, pathetic little play. And she, Chloe Sullivan, had been the play's most foolish leading lady. "Consider the 20,000 your acting fee," Jake said, standing up to look down on Leo. "Thank you for your very dedicated performance these past 3 years." Without another look at anyone, he turned to Dave. "Let's go. The air in here is getting a little stale." Dave suppressed a grin and gave Jake a thumbs up. Brilliant. Absolutely brutal. That wasn't just adding insult to injury. It was twisting the knife. He cleared his throat and waved to his assistants. "Let's move." The group headed for the door. "Jake!" Chloe cried out, a desperate, heart-wrenching sound. She lunged forward, wrapping her arms around him from behind, holding on for dear life. "Don't go. Please don't go." Her face was pressed against his back, her tears instantly soaking through his shirt. "I was wrong. I really was. Jake, can you just give me one more chance? I'm your girlfriend. We've been together for 2 years. Did none of that mean anything?" Jake froze. He could feel the warmth and moisture through his shirt, could smell the familiar scent of her shampoo. To say he felt nothing would be a lie. He had loved her. But some things, once broken, can never be put back together. Trust, respect, and love. When he needed her support the most, she chose to doubt him. When Leo slandered him, she chose to stand by and watch. When she thought he was worthless, she chose to be disappointed. Now that she saw his true value, saw him being courted by giants, she came running back, crying that she was sorry. What was that worth? An apology that late was cheaper than dirt. Jake stood silent for a long moment. He didn't turn, didn't try to break free. He just asked in a perfectly calm voice, Chloe, do you remember the first gift I ever gave you when we just started dating? Chloe was taken aback. The first gift? What was it? She searched her memory, but her mind was a blank. She remembered the limited edition perfume Leo had given her, the $500 a plate restaurant he'd taken her to, the private movie screening he'd arranged for her birthday. But Jake, what had Jake given her? Some handmade gadgets, a music box that lit up, a self-watering device for her plant. They were all collecting dust in a corner of her room. Seeing her hesitation, Jake's heart sank completely. He had his answer. It was a small app, he said, his voice flat and empty. It would sync with your class schedule, the weather, and traffic data to plan your optimal route and travel time for the next day, down to the second. You complained you could never wake up, so it would track your sleep cycle and wake you during your lightest phase of sleep. You complained the cafeteria food sucked, so it would scrape all the local food delivery apps and recommend the highest-rated dishes with the best discounts. The underlying algorithm for that little app was the original prototype for this multi-million-dollar project. Chloe felt as if she'd been struck by lightning. She remembered. There was something like that. Jake had presented it to her like a treasure, and she had casually praised it as kinda neat before never using it again. She found interface too plain, the functions too nerdy. How could she have known that the not-fun little app held such incredible value? I gave it to you because you said you loved the quiet focus I had when I worked, Jake continued. I thought you understood me. He gently, but firmly, pried her fingers from his shirt, one by one. Now I get it. You were never in love with the real me. You were in love with your idea of me. A mediocre boyfriend you could lead, someone who could satisfy your sense of superiority. And after 2 years of playing that part, I'm tired. When the last finger was removed, Jake took a step forward, completely free of her grasp. He didn't look back, leaving her with one final, whispered sentence. We're done, Chloe. Chloe sank to her knees, watching his resolute back as a gut-wrenching sob finally escaped her. She hadn't just lost a boyfriend. She had lost the single most valuable treasure she would ever encounter in her life. Jake walked out of the lab into the empty hallway. Dave and his assistants wisely kept their distance, giving him space. Dave watched his back, marveling. The guy knew when to hold on and when to let go. He had world-changing talent and a will of iron. This man was destined for greatness. Apogee had truly hit the jackpot. As they reached the elevators, Jake stopped. He seemed to remember something and turned back toward the lab. Dave's heart skipped a beat. No way. Is he having second thoughts? I mean, she was crying her eyes out. Jake stared at the lab door for a few seconds, then turned to Dave. Can you wait for me for 1 minute? I forgot to do one last, very important thing. Dave's heart sank. Before he could answer, Jake was already striding back toward the lab. Everyone thought he was going back to comfort the weeping girl. But Jake didn't open the door. He walked to the wall right next to it. There, mounted on the wall, was a red fire safety cabinet. He swung the cabinet door open, reached inside, and pulled out a fire axe. In front of his stunned entourage, Jake raised the axe and brought it down with ferocious force on the door of the small server room next to the lab. Crack! The sound echoed down the hall as the door splintered. As if that wasn't enough, he turned to the junction box where all the network and power cables for the lab and server room converged and began hacking away. Sparks flew. Wires hissed. When he was done, he dropped the axe, dusted off his hands, and a satisfied smile spread across his face. He turned to the speechless Dave who, okay, now all the loose ends are tied up. That trap version of the system. I could fix it, but I wrote it. Leaving it around just felt like a liability. A physical format is much cleaner. Dave stared for a full 10 seconds before his brain caught up with what had just happened. He looked at the mangled cables and sparking fuse box, and his mouth twitched. Brutal. Absolutely brutal. That wasn't tying up loose ends. That was a scorched earth policy, destroying any hope they ever had of recovery. With that one axe, he hadn't just destroyed the system. He had probably knocked out the lab's power for the next month. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Dave gave Jake 2 enthusiastic thumbs up. His admiration for the man was no longer just about technology. This decisiveness, this ruthlessness, it was the mark of a natural-born leader. Jake just smiled faintly, as if he'd done nothing more than take out the trash. Let's go. We shouldn't keep your boss waiting. When Professor Warren and Chloe, startled by the loud crash and subsequent power outage, rushed out of the lab, the hallway was empty. All they saw was the demolished server room door, a mess of severed cables, and an empty fire cabinet on the wall. Did he just take an axe to the server room? A young researcher stammered in disbelief. Professor Warren stared at the devastation, the world spinning around him. It was over. This time, it was truly, completely over. A crashed system held a sliver of hope for repair. But with the hardware and wiring physically destroyed, all the data within, that was 3 years of their lives. Even if most of it was 3 years of Jake's life. He's insane. A complete lunatic. Warren trembled with rage, pointing a shaky finger at the ruined door. Chloe simply leaned against the wall, her face ashen. She knew that axe hadn't just severed cables. It had severed the last, infinitesimal possibility of reconciliation between them. With the most extreme and decisive action possible, he had announced his departure and plunged her world into total darkness. 1 week later, Apogee Innovations, top-floor CEO office. Dave was excitedly reporting to a middle-aged man in a stylish Mandarin collar shirt who was calmly polishing a pair of walnuts in his hands. "Boss, you should have seen it. This kid, Jake Chun, he's a wizard. In a single night, he completely rebuilt the entire foundational architecture of our Nexus operating system. The same project we've been stuck on for 2 years." The man, Marcus Thorne, the founder and CEO of Apogee, paused his polishing and looked up. "Oh, and the result. The result." Dave's face was flushed with excitement. "Performance is up 500%. 500, boss. And the stability and compatibility are light years ahead of our previous version." The old-timers in the tech department were losing their minds. Now they're all fighting over who gets to be Jake's in turn. A rare smile touched Marcus Thorne's lips. "It seems you've truly found me a gem this time." "He's more than a gem." Dave slapped the arm of the sofa. "He's a gold mine. Boss, I recommend we immediately grant Jake the highest level of clearance and establish an independent Nexus project division with him in charge. I have a feeling this kid is going to help Apogee touch the sky." Marcus considered this for a moment, then nodded. "Approved. You brought him in, you'll be his point of contact. Money, people, resources, give him whatever he wants. I have only one condition." His gaze sharpened. "I want to see the first commercial version of the Nexus system online in 3 months." "Yes, sir," Dave said with a mock salute. Just then, there was a knock on the office door. Marcus's executive assistant entered, a strange look on her face. "Mr. Thorne, there's someone here to see you." "To see me?" Marcus was surprised. "Do they have an appointment?" "No." The assistant shook her head. It's Professor Miles Warren from Pacific Bay University. He says he has something extremely important to discuss with you, regarding a man named Jacob Chun." "Professor Warren? Jake?" Marcus and Dave exchanged a knowing look. "Speak of the devil." "Send him up," Marcus said calmly. He was curious to see what game this professor was trying to play. Soon, Professor Warren was escorted in. He looked 10 years older than he had a week ago. His hair was disheveled, his face haggard, and his normally sharp suit was wrinkled. The moment he entered and saw Dave, who on the sofa, he flinched, a look of humiliation and resentment flashing across his face. But he quickly suppressed it and turned his attention to Marcus Thorne. Though he didn't know the man, his position was obvious. "Hello, you must be Mr. Thorne, the CEO of Apogee." Professor Warren forced a smile that looked more like a grimace and extended his hand. Marcus didn't move. He simply lifted his teacup and blew gently on the surface. "Professor Warren, please have a seat." Warren's hand hung awkwardly in the air. He retracted it and sat stiffly on the sofa opposite Dave, trying to maintain the last shred of his academic dignity. "Mr. Thorne, I'm here today to discuss a partnership," he began. "Oh," Marcus raised an eyebrow. "What kind of partnership?" "I know you've hired Jacob Chun," Warren said, taking a deep breath as if steeling himself. "Jake was a core member of our research group. He possesses the complete core technology of our Genesis project, a project we've invested 3 years and immense resources into." Dave nearly snorted at the mention of core technology. He meant the garbage demo Jake had thrown away. Warren, oblivious, pressed on. Although Jake has resigned, according to the agreement he signed, the intellectual property for all research he conducted during his employment belongs to our lab. He is undoubtedly using our technology at your company. Legally, this is a serious infringement. He delivered the lines with a self-righteous, threatening tone. Marcus's smile never wavered. He tapped his teacup lightly on the desk. So, are you here to sue Apogee for infringement, Professor? No, no. Warren waved his hands frantically. You misunderstand, Mr. Thorne. I'm not here to assign blame. I'm here to propose a partnership. He rubbed his hands together, finally revealing his true motive. Our lab is willing to license the entire Genesis project technology to your company. We want to ask for a licensing fee. All we want is 30% of the project's future profits. 30%. Dave gasped. This old man had some nerve. Trying to use Jake's discarded trash to get a cut of the profits from Jake's future creations at his new company. Could anything be more shameless? Marcus finally set down his teacup. He looked at Professor Warren as if studying a peculiar insect. Professor, are you mistaken about something? Here at Apogee, Jake is in charge of our Nexus operating system project. It has absolutely no connection to your Genesis project. How could it not be related? Warren blurted out, agitated. That's all he knows. If he's not copying his own work, he can't just invent something new out of thin air, can he? In his mind, Jake was just a simple coder with a limited skill set. Without his core algorithm, Jake was nothing. Dave couldn't hold back any longer. He cleared his throat and said slowly, Professor, there's something you should know. Jake hasn't used a single line of code from your Genesis project. In one night, he wrote an entirely new foundational architecture that is at least 5 years ahead of yours. Watching Warren's face go slack with disbelief, Dave delivered the final, brutal blow. Oh, and by the way, our CEO has already decided to form an independent division around Jake's new architecture, with an initial investment of $50 million. Your licensable core technology, from our perspective, probably isn't even worthy of shining the Nexus system shoes. Chapter 7. $50 million. Professor Warren felt a hammer slam into his skull. He stared blankly at Dave, then at the nonchalant Marcus Thorne, his mouth hanging open, unable to form a single word. One night, a completely new architecture. 5 years ahead. A $50 million investment. The words swirled together, utterly demolishing his last shred of hope and dignity. His prized Genesis project, his only bargaining chip, was worthless in their eyes. And the person who had created this new marvel was the very man he had despised and discarded. The irony was crushing. No. Impossible. Professor Warren stammered, his mind reeling. That's absolutely impossible. One person. How could he? Why not? Dave countered. For a genius, isn't performing miracles just another day at the office? Genius. The word was a red-hot brand searing Warren's heart. All this time, he thought Leo was the genius. He had poured all his resources, all his hopes, into that flashy, fraudulent pretender. Meanwhile, the real genius was right under his nose for 3 years, ignored and ordered around. Regret, sharp and venomous, chewed at his insides. If only he had paid more attention to Jake, if he had shown him just a sliver more trust and respect. Then he, Miles Warren, would be the one sitting here today, basking in the glow of a $50 million investment, on the verge of greatness. Instead, he was a pathetic beggar, being mercilessly mocked. Marcus Thorne had seen enough. He glanced at his assistant. Professor Warren, if there's nothing else, you can see yourself out. I'm a very busy man. The assistant stepped forward. Professor, this way, please. Warren was a statue of despair. He knew that if he walked out that door, he would have nothing left. His reputation, his project, his funding, all of it would vanish. He couldn't accept it. Suddenly, a last-ditch idea sparked in his mind. He shot up, his eyes wild. Mr. Thorne, you can't use him. Jake, he has an integrity problem. Marcus and Dave both frowned. He destroyed millions of dollars worth of university server equipment. That's a felony. I've already filed a police report. He's going to be arrested. If you have a criminal as a key executive, it will severely damage your company's reputation. Warren yelled, clinging to this last desperate straw. Dave and Marcus exchanged a look, and both broke into laughter. Professor, have you forgotten? Dave reminded him kindly. That day, Jake only entered your lab to help you after you paid him a $20,000 consulting fee, which means from that moment on, he was your temporarily hired technical consultant. And if a consultant, during the course of his work, makes an operational error, or, let's say, deems it necessary, and performs a physical format on some equipment, legally, that's at worst a workplace mistake requiring compensation. Dave pulled a check from his suit pocket and slid it across the table. Millions of dollars? Professor, that pile of scrap metal you had wasn't worth $500,000, let alone several. This check is for $1 million. Consider it compensation on Jake's behalf. Is that sincere enough for you? As for your police report, Dave's smile turned to ice. Apogee's legal department retains dozens of the top lawyers in the country. They would be delighted to entertain your claim. But I should remind you, filing a false report is also a crime. Warren stared at the check. The flimsy piece of paper felt as heavy as a mountain, crushing the air from his lungs. It was the ultimate humiliation. They were using money to shut him up, to show him just how powerless his little schemes were in the face of real capital and strength. And one more thing. Marcus finally spoke, his voice quiet but carrying an undeniable authority. Regarding Leo Morgan's academic fraud and misappropriation of research funds, our legal team has already submitted a complete chain of evidence to Pacific Bay University's Disciplinary Committee and the Department of Education. As a supervising professor and project lead, I imagine you will also be held accountable, won't you, Professor Warren? That was the final blow. Warren went limp, collapsing back onto the sofa, his face the color of ash. He knew he was finished. Not just the project. His career, his entire life was over. Meanwhile, Pacific Bay University, outside the women's dormitory. Chloe stood, holding a thermal lunch container, her eyes hollow. She had been waiting for 2 hours. Since that day, Jake had become a ghost. He wouldn't answer her calls or reply to her texts. She'd gone to their old apartment, but it was empty. After a frantic search, she finally got the address for Apogee Innovations from a mutual acquaintance. She didn't know where he lived now, so she resorted to the only thing she could think of, waiting outside his new office building every day. Today, she had finally worked up the courage to go inside, only to be politely informed by the front desk that she couldn't go up without an appointment. Defeated, she had gone back to her dorm, cooked his favorite sweet and sour pork ribs, and returned. Maybe, she thought, if he saw her sincerity, he would soften. She rehearsed what she would say over and over. She would apologize, she would cry, she would tell him she couldn't live without him. Just then, a black Maybach purred to a stop in front of the dormitory. A gracefully dressed woman in a stylish suit stepped out and walked directly toward Chloe. "Excuse me, are you Chloe Sullivan?" the woman asked with a professional smile. Chloe nodded numbly. "My name is Linda Wei. I'm the executive assistant to the CEO of Apogee Innovations." The woman introduced herself. "Mr. Chen asked me to return a few things to you." She gestured to an assistant, who retrieved several boxes from the car and placed them at Chloe's feet. Chloe looked down, and her heart seized. The boxes were filled with everything she had given Jake over the past 2 years. Clothes, shoes, a watch. And there, tucked in a corner, were the handmade gadgets she had once dismissed, the light-up music box, the self-watering device. Each item was neatly packed, spotless. Mr. Chun said he no longer has any use for these things. He wishes to return them, so you can both be free of any obligation. Linda's voice was polite but distant. Chloe swayed, and the container in her hands slipped, crashing to the ground. The pork ribs scattered across the pavement, sauce splattering everywhere, just like her shattered heart. Additionally, Mr. Chen asked me to relay a message. Linda looked at Chloe's pale face, a flicker of pity in her eyes, but she delivered the words verbatim. "He said he's starting a new life. He asked that you please stop trying to contact him. He said that seeing you affects his concentration when he's trying to code." Chapter 8 affects his concentration when he's trying to code. The words were a poisoned dagger, twisting into Chloe's deepest wound. She looked up, her eyes wide with disbelief. The man who once cherished her, who would have done anything to see her smile, now found her a nuisance, an obstacle to his work. Tears streamed down her face. She wanted to scream, to argue, but the only sound that escaped her was a choked sob. What right did she have? She was the one who had pushed him away. Linda watched her, sighing softly. It was the oldest and most painful story in the book. She offered Chloe a tissue from her purse. "My condolences, Miss Sullivan." The sympathy was more cutting than any insult. Chloe didn't take the tissue. She just stared at the boxes, at the items that represented her misguided love and her foolish sense of superiority. How laughable it all seemed now. She had bought him $100 shirts, oblivious to the fact that a single line of his code was worth millions. She had treated him to expensive dinners, never realizing all he probably wanted was a simple bowl of noodles made by her. She thought she was the one giving charity. In the end, she was the poorest one of all. Her task complete, Linda turned to leave. Just then, a young man in a tracksuit jogged up, panting. "Chloe, there you are. I've been looking all over for you." It was Brad Thompson, a classmate and the president of the student government. Always had a crush on Chloe, but never had a chance. The moment he heard she and Jake had broken up, he saw his opening. Brad took in the scene, the mess on the ground, the tears on Chloe's face, and was instantly filled with righteous indignation. "What happened? Who did this to you? Was it that loser, Jake, again? Did he come back to bother you?" In his mind, Jake was a reject, kicked out of the lab, and dumped by his girlfriend. He must be desperate. The word loser made Chloe flinch as if she'd been stabbed. Not long ago, she had thought the same thing, but hearing it from someone else's mouth was unbearable. "Shut up," she yelled, her voice raw. "Don't you dare talk about him like that." Brad was stunned. He hadn't expected this reaction. Was she still hung up on that guy? "Chloe, don't be stupid. What's there to miss? I heard after Professor Warren fired him, he couldn't even find a job. Look at me. I'm student body president. I have a job lined up at the university after graduation. I have a future. I'm the one who's right for you." He puffed out his chest, his face radiating confidence. Linda, about to get into her car, paused. She turned and gave Brad a long, slow look, as if he were a particularly stupid specimen under a microscope. Then, she pulled a business card from her purse and walked back over to him. "Excuse me," she said. Brad stared at the impeccably dressed woman. "Oh, are you Linda Way, executive assistant to the CEO, Apogee Innovations," she said, her voice dripping with ice. "The loser you mentioned, who supposedly can't find a job. He's now our chief architect and the head of the Nexus project. His salary is $500,000 a year, plus stock options currently valued at over $10 million. She pressed the card into his hand. "And you?" Linda let out a small, disdainful laugh. "A student government president who's already planning to coast in university admin job? To be frank, you're not even qualified to shine our Mr. Chen's shoes." Without another glance at Brad's face, which had turned a deep shade of purple, she turned and slipped gracefully into the Maybach. The black luxury car glided away, leaving behind a petrified Brad and a sobbing Chloe. Brad stared at the business card. Chief architect, $500,000, $10 million in stock. His entire worldview imploded. His prized accomplishments, his bright future, all seemed laughably insignificant in the face of those cold, hard numbers. He looked at Chloe, his eyes filled with envy and resentment. She wasn't crying for a loser. She was crying for a titan she could now never hope to reach. Apogee Innovations, Jake's private office. Dave, who was waving a document, practically bouncing with excitement. "Jake, you're a legend. The distributed data processing solution you hammered out last night is a work of art. It just increased the Nexus system's data throughput by an order of magnitude." Jake leaned back in his ergonomic chair, rubbing his tired eyes. Since joining Apogee, he had thrown himself into his work. The feeling of being able to unleash his talent without holding back was intoxicating. The tech fanatic inside him was finally awake. "It's not enough," Jake said, looking at the screen. "The current hardware is still the bottleneck. I need a new bank of higher performance servers." "Done." Dave slapped his chest. "The boss said whatever you need, you get. I'll tell procurement this afternoon to buy you a truckload of the best servers on the market." Jake nodded, taking a sip of coffee. "So," Dave said, a mischievous grin spreading across his face. I heard you had Linda return all your ex-girlfriend stuff? Jake's hand paused for a fraction of a second. Yeah, cold, man. Real cold, Dave chuckled. I've seen her. She's gorgeous. No regrets. Jake's gaze drifted to the window, which overlooked the city's bustling financial district. From the top floor, he could see everything. Here, he had resources, status, and wealth he'd never dreamed of. He could finally build the future he envisioned. Regrets? Maybe a fleeting pang, but you have to keep moving forward. Some views, once missed, are gone forever. He refocused on the screen. Dave, don't you have work to do? Dave just laughed. Hey, I'm looking out for you. And speaking of which, I got some good news. What is it? The list for our new Genius Intern program is out. Dave winked. Guess who's number one? Jake frowned, uninterested. It's the star of the PBU Computer Science Department, the only person in our year to win the national programming competition 3 times in a row, Stella Sia. Dave announced dramatically. She was the dream girl of every coder on campus. I heard she went to grad school overseas. I can't believe she's interning with us. Dave was practically giddy. Already talked to HR. I'm assigning her to the Nexus team, reporting directly to you. How's that for a welcome gift? He looked at Jake, expecting praise. But Jake's expression was blank, his eyes still on his code. Stelexia. He had a faint, fuzzy memory of the name. Wasn't she a rival of his in some college competition? The quiet girl in the white dress who could single-handedly demolish an entire opposing team. Just then, there was a knock on his office door. Speak of the devil, Dave grinned. That must be your new intern now. He walked over and opened the door. Standing in the doorway was a young woman in a simple white dress, her long hair cascading down her back. Her features were exquisite, and her eyes were clear and bright, as if they could see right through you. She gave Dave a polite nod, but her gaze went past him, locking onto the figure sitting in front of the computer. Her eyes instantly lit up, and a beautiful, unconscious smile graced her lips. She stepped inside, her voice as clear as a bell. Jacob Chun, it's been a long time. My name is Stella Sia. Starting today, I'm your intern. It's a pleasure to be here. Chapter 9. Jake finally looked up from his screen, his eyes meeting Stella's. Her gaze was an open book, undisguised joy, the thrill of a long-awaited reunion, and something else. A deeper emotion he couldn't quite decipher. He did remember her. Stelexia. In college, she was the other programming prodigy. But while he preferred the shadows, Stella was a supernova, the golden child of every professor and student. They had faced off once in the finals of the National Collegiate Programming Contest, a grueling battle that lasted over 10 hours. He had won, but only by the slimmest of margins. It was the only time they had ever really interacted. Afterward, he went back to being the campus ghost, and she went on to study abroad, covered in accolades. He never expected to see her again, let alone like this. Hello, Jake said with a simple nod. His flat response made Dave, standing beside them, want to tear his hair out. This was Stella Sia, the legendary goddess of computer science. Guys would have killed for a chance to even talk to her, and his boy Jake was acting like she was here to deliver a pizza. Dave quickly jumped in. Stella, welcome, welcome. You'll be on the Nexus team, working directly with Jake. The sky's the limit for you here. But Stella's attention remained fixed on Jake. I heard, she began, her eyes sparkling with curiosity, that you rebuilt the entire Nexus foundational architecture in a single night. Jake didn't answer, which she took as a yes. And I also heard your new distributed data processing solution increased the system's performance by an order of magnitude. Jake remained silent. Stella's eyes shone brighter. It was the look of a grandmaster who had just met her match. That's incredible, she said, her voice full of genuine awe. I studied the old, open-source version of Nexus. That architecture was pushed to its absolute limit. I couldn't imagine how anyone could achieve such a massive improvement on that foundation. She took 2 steps forward, right up to his desk. Could you walk me through your thinking? Her tone was pure, unadulterated passion for the craft. It was a world away from Chloe's superficial admiration or Leo's sycophantic flattery. This was a true enthusiast asking for a glimpse into the mind of a master. Jake looked into her clear eyes and, after a moment's pause, did something unexpected. He turned his laptop around and pushed it toward her. On the screen was the complex, elegant architectural diagram he had just completed. See for yourself. Dave's jaw dropped. That was Jake's baby, the most sensitive, core secret of the entire Nexus project. And he was just showing it to an intern on her first day? Even if that intern was Stella Xia, this was unbelievably trusting. Stella's breath hitched. She leaned forward, her hands on the desk, her eyes devouring the diagram. She scanned the countless lines and modules, her expression shifting from curiosity to shock to outright reverence. I see. So that's how... She murmured, as if discovering a new continent. Using virtual memory mapping to replace traditional file I/O. My God, that's insane. And this multi-version concurrency control based on timestamps. You've basically applied database logic to an operating system. And here, this dynamic load balancing algorithm. It incorporates a game theory model. The more she looked, the more astounded she became. This wasn't just optimization. It was a complete paradigm shift, a revolutionary innovation from the ground up. Every one of Jake's designs was wildly imaginative, yet perfectly grounded in technical feasibility. It was bold, brilliant, and brutally elegant. It was the aesthetic of a true genius. Dave listened to her excited whispers, his own mind blown. He understood Jake's design, but not on this deep, intuitive level. It was true. Only a genius can truly understand another genius. After what felt like an eternity, Stella slowly straightened up and let out a long breath. The way she looked at Jake had transformed from admiration to pure, unadulterated reverence. It was the look a true believer gives their God. Jacob Chun, she said, her voice filled with conviction, you are the most brilliant programmer I have ever met. Coming from her, it was the highest possible praise. A small, almost imperceptible smile touched Jake's lips. It was a rare feeling to be truly understood. Having someone who could speak his language. It wasn't bad. That's all theory, Jake said quietly. Making it a reality is what matters. I understand. A fire ignited in Stella's eyes. Give me the hardest part. I promise I won't let you down. Seeing her passion, Jake felt his own spirits lift. He pointed to a module on the screen. This memory management module is the foundation of the entire system. It's also the most complex. You think you can handle it? Yes, she replied without a moment's hesitation. Dave watched them, nodding to himself. A power couple in the making. The Nexus project was destined for greatness. He was about to add a witty comment when the office door was knocked on yet again. He frowned. What was with all the interruptions today? He opened the door and froze. Standing there was a haggard old man in a worn-out suit, his hair white and his face a wreck. It was Professor Warren. He looked even worse than he had at the CEO's office, his eyes bloodshot and his body trembling. He saw Dave, open his mouth, but no sound came out. What are you doing here? Dave demanded. Warren ignored him, shoving past him and stumbling into the room. His eyes locked onto Jake. Jake! His voice was a dry, rasping sound. And then, with a soft thud, the once arrogant Professor Miles Warren fell to his knees in front of Jacob Chun. Jake, I'm begging you. Save me. He reached a trembling hand for Jake's leg, but Stella stepped between them, her face a mask of cold fury. What do you think you're doing? She snapped. Warren didn't even look at her. His eyes, filled with tears, were fixed on Jake. Now, he was expelled for academic fraud, and fraud charges were filed. They're investigating him. They revoked my tenure. All my project funding has been frozen and recalled. I am ruined. I have nothing left. He sobbed like a gambler who had lost his final chip. Jake, I was wrong. I was so wrong. I was blind. He looked up, a last, desperate hope in his eyes. Apogee is building an operating system, right? I can. I can bring my entire lab, my whole team. We'll work for you for free. All I ask is that you talk to the university. Tell them to let me off. The office was silent. Dave was speechless. Stella was disgusted. Jake looked down at the weeping, kneeling man, his face a blank canvas. Begging? Repentance? Where's all this when he was kicking him out the door? Jake didn't even deign to give him a verbal answer. He picked up his office phone and dialed security. Top floor, chief architect's office. We have a trespasser. Please come handle it. Chapter 10. After hanging up, Jake didn't spare Professor Warren another glance. He turned to Stella. Give me a detailed design document for that memory management module by tomorrow morning. You got it. Stella nodded immediately, a flicker of admiration in her eyes. She was glad the man she looked up to wasn't a sentimental fool shackled by the past. Hearing Jake's cold dismissal, Warren's last hope died. He collapsed completely, a heap of despair on the floor. Soon, 2 large security guards arrived. Mr. Chun, Mr. Hu. Dave waved a hand toward the floor. Please escort this man out, and make sure he is never allowed inside this building again. Yes, sir. The guards hoisted the limp form of Professor Warren up and began dragging him away. Jake, you can't do this to me. I was your mentor for 3 years. You. Warren's shouts faded as the elevator doors slid shut. Finally, the office was quiet again. You reap what you sow, Dave said with a shake of his head. Jake's expression remained unchanged. To him, Warren, Leo, Chloe, they were all ghosts from a past life. Their fates were no longer his concern. His concern was Nexus and a new era he was about to build. All right, back to work, Jake said, dismissing them. You heard the man. Dave shot Stella a wink. Go get him, Stella. We're all counting on you. A faint blush colored Stella's cheeks. She nodded to both of them and headed out to her assigned desk, which was just outside Jake's glass-walled office. From there, she could see him, focused and intense, a magnetic silhouette against the glow of his monitors. A sense of profound contentment washed over her. To work alongside him, to tackle impossible challenges together. This was everything she had dreamed of since college. She took a deep breath, opened her laptop, and began to architect the future. Night fell. The office emptied out floor by floor, until only 2 lights remained, Jake's and Stella's. Immersed in his code, Jake lost all track of time. A soft knock on his door pulled him back to reality. It was Stella, holding a steaming mug. It's late, she said with a gentle smile. I made you some coffee. Jake glanced at the clock. It was almost 1 a.m. You're still here. My design doc isn't finished, she said, placing the mug on his desk. Besides, watching you code is a pleasure. It was the truth. She had been watching him for hours. His fingers flew across the keyboard with a dancer's grace. He wasn't working. He was creating art. Jake looked at the coffee, then at Stella's bright, sincere eyes in the warm lamplight. Something in him softened. It had been a long time since someone had brought him coffee late at night. Chloe used to, but her offerings were always tinged with impatience. Jake, are you still working on that? Hurry up so we can go home. Stella's coffee held no such demands. It was a simple, quiet gesture of companionship. Thanks, he said, and took a sip. It was warm and rich. Seeing him drink it, Stella's smile widened. There's something I've always wanted to ask you. Go ahead. Back then, why did you choose to work in Professor Warren's obscure little lab? She asked, her curiosity palpable. With your talent, you could have gone anywhere. Overseas like me, or straight to a top company like Apogee. This was the one puzzle about him she could never solve. Why would a genius who had bested her choose to hibernate in a tiny pond for 3 years? Jake's gaze drifted to the window, to the sea of lights that was the city at night. Why? Because 3 years ago, a girl had told him her dream was to do research with the man she loved in a quiet university lab, growing old together. For that simple, naive dream, he had turned down a full scholarship abroad and rejected offers from every major tech company. He thought he could make that dream a reality for her. He was wrong. He had been the only one performing in that play. No reason, Jake said, his voice flat. The university was close to home. It was a weak excuse, and they both knew it. But Stella was smart enough not to press him. She just watched him and said softly, whatever happened in the past, it's over now. You're at Apogee. Here, no one will ever overlook your talent. We could do a lot of cool things together. Her voice was a gentle, steady anchor in the quiet night. Jake's heart stirred. He looked at her, and in her eyes, he saw the reflection of the city's stars and the reflection of himself. It was a clear, bright, hopeful vision. Maybe, just maybe, a new story could begin. Just then, his personal phone vibrated. A text from an unknown number. He ignored it, but it buzzed again and again, persistent and frantic. He frowned and picked it up. On the screen was a photo of a woman lying in a hospital bed, pale and unconscious. It was Chloe. Below the photo was a short, desperate message. Jake, This is Chloe's mother. Chloe. She tried to kill herself. The doctors say she has no will to live. She might not make it through the night. Before she lost consciousness, she kept calling her name. Please, I'm begging you. Can you come see her one last time? Jake's pupils contracted. His hand tightened around the phone. Stella saw the immediate, violent shift in his demeanor. Jake, what is it? He didn't answer, his eyes locked on the pale face in the photo. His mind was a maelstrom. Did he hate her? Yes. But was she really dying? The vibrant, proud, infuriating girl who had brought him both joy and pain. Was she really about to disappear from the world? An invisible hand squeezed his heart, tight and suffocating. Stella watched his tormented expression, and her own face hardened with understanding. She didn't ask questions. She simply reached out and placed her warm hand over his. Jake, she said, looking him directly in the eye, her voice firm and clear. Go do what you feel you have to do. Don't leave yourself with any regrets. He looked up at her, shocked. Her eyes held no jealousy, no suspicion, only absolute trust and support. It was the anchor he needed. He took a deep breath, stood, and grabbed his jacket. My design document will be on your desk in the morning, she said quietly to his back. Okay. He didn't look back. He just strode out of the office. Stella stood alone, watching his reflection disappear as the elevator doors closed. A complex emotion flickered in her eyes. She pulled out her own phone and dialed number. Linda, it's me. Can you do me a favor? Check the admission records for Bay Area General Hospital tonight. I'm looking for a patient named Chloe Sullivan. Yes, an attempted suicide. She hung up and walked to the massive floor-to-ceiling window, looking down at the river of traffic below. Soon, Jake's car joined the flow, a single point of light heading into the distance. A small, cold smile touched Stella's lips. Chloe Sullivan? A failure who couldn't tell the difference between a diamond and a piece of glass. She didn't deserve to be Jake's regret. She didn't deserve to be anything at all. Her phone pinged. A message from Linda. No one by that name has been admitted.